Hello, my name is Stephanie Ishii, and I'm a senior associate with the consulting firm Hazen and Sawyer. I'm here today to present the findings of a regional water study as related specifically to Ross County. The regional study evaluated the adequacy of water resources and associated infrastructure across central Ohio throughout a 25-year planning horizon. The project was developed by the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources in partnership with the Ohio Water Development Authority. The detailed modeling and analyses were conducted by the hired consulting team led by Hazen and Sawyer. While the overall project considered water resources and infrastructure throughout the 15-county study area, this presentation will focus exclusively on the analyses and findings related to Ross County. The agenda for this presentation includes the following sections: an introduction to the study and its objectives, a discussion of the current and future conditions that were evaluated as part of this project, a presentation of the needs analysis of current and future water supply, demand, and treatment capabilities. The resource gaps and potential project options section identifies areas where existing developed water supply and infrastructure capabilities are insufficient relative to projected future needs. Insufficiencies are referred to as gaps. For each gap, potential project options will be presented. We will also discuss opportunity areas that have been identified. These are areas where existing water supply and/or infrastructure capabilities will exceed projected future demands. In other words, these are areas where there's a surplus of water resources and/or infrastructure capacity. Lastly, water quality. We will close with a discussion of projected changes to water quality throughout the planning horizon. Projected water quality impacts were developed based on projected changes to residential development, industrial development, and temperature and precipitation conditions. Let's begin with a high-level introduction to the study. The Central Ohio Regional Water Study was completed for a 15-county area, as shown on the map. The overall goal was to quantify current and future water-related needs within the region and to identify areas with water-related gaps and surpluses. The study evaluated water-related needs that span drinking water supply, drinking water treatment capacity, wastewater treatment capacity, receiving water capacity, and water quality for the years 2030, 2040, and 2050. 4 key project objectives were identified for the Central Ohio Regional Water Study. The objectives included, first, improve, maintain, and optimize resources while planning for growth. Results of the model were used to evaluate opportunities to secure safe and reliable water supply for public use, consider reuse water for non-potable needs, and identify areas of capacity limitations. Future solutions were required to maintain beneficial use of water required for recreation, wildlife, and economic growth. Second, identify opportunities for collaboration and regionalization. The project created a dashboard planning tool that will serve as a focal point for collaboration between utilities and state agencies, helping to ensure best use of both water and financial resources. Third, maximize funding impacts through sustainable infrastructure improvements. Using the analytical capabilities in the dashboard, state agencies can now and will in the future be able to help identify funding to build the infrastructure needed to meet the long-term needs for the region. And lastly, identify future needs. The project also provides information to the state agencies on how stormwater and surface waters will be impacted by the growth and development that's projected. The project can be used to identify opportunities to help mitigate impacts of development on the environment. The focus of the presentation will now shift to a discussion of the current water resource conditions in Ross County. This section will also include an introduction to the modeling that was completed for the evaluation of the overall water resources throughout the project area. An integrated water resources model was developed to evaluate the available water supply, water demands, wastewater demands, and other uses of water throughout the region. The integrated model includes several components that are all connected to one another, as outlined in this graphic. Surface water, along with reservoirs and groundwater supply, feed either directly to water demands or feed a water treatment plant. That water treatment plant, in turn, supplies water demands, including the local population, golf courses, industries, and a myriad of other uses. These water demands then go to a wastewater treatment plant where the water is treated and returned to surface water or groundwater supplies. The water resources model developed for this project attempts to track all of the water uses in central Ohio and determine if sufficient water supplies exist for projected growth. The model evaluates if there's enough treatment capacity, if all demands can be met, and if wastewater treatment plants can treat the projected flows. The model was evaluated for the entire 15-county region, but this presentation will focus on the current and future supply and demand for water resources in Ross County. Groundwater availability was estimated at the Huck 10 watershed level. Huck 10 is the size of the hydrologic area used in the model. To explain, Huck, or HUC, stands for Hydrologic Unit Code, and the 10 stands for the number of digits. The U.S. Geological Survey has delineated each of the watersheds in the country and assigned them a specific number based on their location, similar to a zip code. The system identifies drainage areas into regions, that's got 2 digits, subregions, that has 4 digits, basins, 6 digits, subbasins, 8 digits, watersheds, that's got 10 digits, and subwatersheds, 12 digits. The map reflects the Huck 10 watershed level, and the watersheds in Ross County are labeled and shown on the map. There are 5 Huck 10 watersheds shown on the map. For each of the watersheds, the average daily sustainable groundwater availability was estimated. These values are shown in units of MGD, or millions of gallons per day. It's important to note that the groundwater isn't actually uniformly available across the entire watershed. The color shading on the map indicates the recharge capability, with darker shading reflecting areas with higher recharge. That's where groundwater would be more plentiful. One daily groundwater availability value was assumed per Huck 10 watershed, and all groundwater users within that Huck 10 were assumed to share that amount of groundwater. Groundwater supplies in Ross County range from 4 to 30 million gallons per day for every given Huck 10. Across these watersheds, an estimated total of 86 million gallons per day can sustainably be withdrawn from Ross County groundwater supplies. Now, there are a few disclaimers about the groundwater approach that should be noted. First of all, scale. This study estimates total groundwater availability in each Huck 10 watershed as a single value, which makes its predictive capability only suitable for very large-scale assessments. These results are not suitable for site-specific analyses or really any groundwater investigations besides those at a regional or sub-regional scale. Second of all, delineation. Aquifer boundaries do not always coincide with overlaying surface water systems. In this study, groundwater boundaries are defined by surface watersheds, and consequently, some aquifers may be split by unsuitable borders. This can lead to unexpected or misleading results, especially near watershed boundaries. And then lastly, uncertainty. Groundwater maps and studies always involve a high degree of uncertainty due to the complex nature of aquifers and the lack of widespread, reliable data sets of aquifer characteristics and water level information. While this is not unique to this study, its scale and time frame make its groundwater availability estimates especially uncertain. Site-specific groundwater investigations can mitigate these uncertainties. Egan and Associates assisted with the groundwater analysis and provided information regarding groundwater resources and conditions throughout the study area. For the Little Creek, North Fork, Paint Creek Huck 10, sand and gravel outwash aquifers are mapped along the Little Creek and North Fork Paint Creek within the Huck. The carbonate bedrock aquifer is present in the northwestern part of the Huck. According to the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, or ODNR, yields from bedrock wells could be in the range of 100 to over 300 gallons per minute, or GPM. Areas outside of the outwash and carbonate bedrock aquifers offer little potential for high-capacity groundwater supply development. For the Buxton Creek, Paint Creek Huck 10, a sand and gravel outwash aquifer is present along Paint Creek within the Huck, and the western extent of the aquifer is greater than mapped by ODNR. The carbonate bedrock aquifer has limited presence within the Huck. According to ODNR, yields from bedrock wells could be in the range of 50 to over 300 GPM. Areas where the outwash and carbonate aquifers are not present offer little potential for high-capacity groundwater supply development. For the Ralston Run, Paint Creek Huck 10, the greatest potential for water supply development in the Huck is from the sand and gravel outwash aquifer near the confluence of Paint Creek and Scioto River south of Chillicothe. The outwash aquifer is also present along Paint Creek west of the Scioto River. Areas outside of the outwash aquifers offer little potential for high-capacity groundwater supply development. For the Kinnickinnic Creek Scioto River Huck 10, the greatest potential for water supply development in the Huck is from the sand and gravel outwash aquifer along the Scioto River. Areas outside of the outwash aquifer offer little potential for high-capacity groundwater supply development. And then the last Huck for the Walnut Creek Scioto River Huck 10, the greatest potential for water supply development in the Huck is from the sand and gravel outwash aquifer along the Scioto River. Areas outside of the outwash aquifer offer little potential for high-capacity groundwater supply development. And then lastly, to conclude our discussion of groundwater availability estimates, it should be noted that this study assumes that groundwater availability per Huck 10 is unaffected by land use change, as well as unaffected by changes in precipitation and temperature over time, meaning that high recharge areas are assumed to be protected despite land use change, and long-term cumulative precipitation is assumed to remain consistent. This is contrary to surface water availability estimates, which are sensitive to both land use and temperature and precipitation conditions within our model. Surface water availability is the cumulative sum of surface water from all watersheds in the county. However, surface water availability will vary for each stream location. Ross County is estimated to have an approximate 122.8 million gallons per day, or MGD, of surface water availability. It should be noted that the surface water availability estimates shown here on this slide are the raw runoff estimates, and they don't yet include the modeled wastewater return flows that are added to the streams within the overall model. The surface water supply value is the minimum monthly average value for the current conditions. Adding both the groundwater and surface water supplies together, it's estimated that Ross County has roughly 209 million gallons per day of total available raw water supply. This supply availability is nearly split between groundwater and surface water, with slightly more availability coming from surface water. Supply availability at the sub-county level varies by location based on aquifer yields and surface water tributary area, as presented on the previous slides. The next focus for this resource evaluation was the existing and future demands that draw raw source water from these available water resources. Data on water demand was developed using population data that was available on a regional basis. The information on current county population was obtained from MORPC, the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. These population data were used to further calculate water demand. The map on the slide is a heat map indicating the current estimated population distribution within the county. This estimate is for the year 2021, which is the year that current conditions are based on. Areas in the blue tones are the more densely populated areas, while the yellow tones indicate a less densely populated area. The darker blue in the center of the county indicates the population in the Chillicothe area. This map shows the assumed utility service areas for the county. Water demands were calculated for each utility using service area boundaries, the population within the service area, and recent historical water production data reported to the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency. A per capita water use was calculated for each service area. This is calculated by taking the water production data and dividing by the assumed population within the service area, which resulted in a per capita water use of gallons per person per day. This per capita water use includes all types of users within the service area, whether it's residential, commercial, or industrial. It's important to note that in future conditions, no surface area expansion was assumed, and water per capita use for each utility was assumed to stay the same. This means that growth in projected population would also mean a proportional growth in commercial and industrial demand within the utility service area boundary. For future water demands, the per capita water use was multiplied by the assumed future population within the service area. The total calculated demands for the county are shown in the pie chart, categorized by type. In total, the water demands are 48 million gallons per day in the county for the 2021 current conditions. The largest portion of the demand is shown in red and represents industrial demands. This demand is approximately 35 MGD. These demands are based upon recent water withdrawal data that's reported to the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. The next largest portion of the demand is shown in the dark blue, which is labeled as municipal demand. This demand is approximately 8 MGD and is based on the population and utility boundaries discussed earlier. It should be noted that each demand can be served by a public or private utility. All of these various demands draw water from the available surface and groundwater resources. The municipal portion also has an associated wastewater component. The wastewater flow in the county includes the water from the surface areas that is used, in addition to the inflow and infiltration component, or I&I, which was estimated and included in the wastewater flow. For the current conditions, the maximum annual average wastewater flow is approximately 1.6 MGD at the county level. The annual average wastewater flows were analyzed as opposed to the maximum month flow, which was done for drinking water. This is due to the wet weather impacts observed in wastewater due to the inflow and infiltration impact. During rainy conditions, areas with combined sewer systems can have very high flow rates, while during dry times, only the base flow is observed. The high rainfall in a single month can skew the monthly average. Therefore, an overall annual calculation is used to determine if a particular plant is nearing its permitted treatment capacity limit. The existing demands and flows can be compared to the existing infrastructure. In Ross County, there are a number of water treatment plants, and their total combined capacity is 16.6 million gallons per day. All of the source water is pulled from groundwater. Recall that the total maximum daily water demands are about 48 million gallons per day. So in the current conditions, the county does not have a sufficient treatment capacity to provide treated water to meet all the demand types. But when the large existing industrial users are excluded, there is sufficient capacity to provide treated water to the remaining demand types. These current industrial users have direct water withdrawals and don't receive treated water. From a wastewater treatment plant capacity standpoint, the county has 4.4 million gallons per day of permitted capacity at the existing facilities across the county. The current maximum annual average wastewater flow generated by the demand and inflow and infiltration is about 1.6 MGD. Therefore, the existing county infrastructure is sufficient to meet the current wastewater flows. With an understanding of the current conditions in the county, the next step was to expand the analysis and explore potential future conditions. This study evaluated conditions in 2030, 2040, and 2050. When analyzing future conditions, current data is projected from the present to a future point in time. With that projection comes uncertainty, which is why analyzing multiple potential future scenarios can provide more resiliency and reduce the risk of failure. Scenario planning acknowledges that there are several possible and plausible future conditions that may occur and allows planning for several possible future conditions. On the left side of the cone, there's only one point because concurrent conditions are known. As time goes on, the cone of uncertainty expands and the range of possible future conditions widens. The widening could indicate divergence among scenarios and changes in the recommended projects that align with that scenario. Analyzing several scenarios, or plausible futures, helps ready the region for ending up in futures A, B, or C, and knowing the projects to implement along the way. 4 model scenarios were developed to define the range of potential futures. Scenario conditions that were explored were 2 different precipitation and temperature changes, and 2 different population estimates, totaling 4 different model scenarios. The different inputs of each of these scenarios will be explored further on the following slides. 2 population sources were used for the scenario modeling. The expected growth trend was informed by Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, or MORPC. The MORPC population projections were informed by local zoning and land use plans. The historical growth trend was informed by the Ohio Department of Development, or ODOD. The ODOD population projections are informed by historical birth, death, and migration trends. The population projections were used to estimate the future increases in municipal water demands and private water system demands over time. The bar chart on the left shows the different county-level growth rates between 2020 and 2050 for the 2 population sources. The table to the right shows the future estimated total Ross County population for each of the 2 sources. Both the MORPC and ODOD projections estimate a population decrease at the county level. The ODOD projections result in a larger population decrease than the MORPC projections. Municipal and private water system populations are assumed to change over time based upon the two population estimates that were just described. The left graph shows the municipal population over time for both population estimates, and the right graph shows the private water system population over time for both population estimates. The municipal population are the people assumed to be served by a utility because they live within an assumed service area. The private water system population are the people assumed to be outside of a service area, thus having their own self-serving groundwater wells. The municipal population and the private water system populations are nearly even for the county, meaning about half of the people in the county are assumed to have water served by a utility, and the other half are self-serving. The two heat maps show the current and future estimated population distribution within Ross County for the expected growth trend. The left figure shows the current 2021 condition, and the right graph shows the future 2050 condition. Comparing the two figures, there's not much population change expected throughout the county. Current and future land use data were also provided by the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, or MORPC. The left image shows the current 2021 land use condition, and the right image shows the future 2050 land use condition. The land use categories match that of the National Land Cover Database. For the current condition, a large portion of the county is pasture hay land use, with various areas of mixed forest and development. Over time, there's minimal land use changes estimated for the 2050 planning horizon. Another element of the scenario modeling are the different temperature and precipitation scenarios projected associated with climate change. Historical precipitation and temperature data from 1983 to 2022 were used to estimate the surface water runoff and evaporation. For the future conditions, change factors were applied to the historical precipitation and temperature data to analyze the effects it may have on surface water availability. Temperature and precipitation changes were based on the global climate model data downscaled to the Central Ohio area. There are different change factors for each month and future planning year, those years being 2030, 2040, and 2050. Change factors were extracted from an ensemble of 49 global climate models from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Two scenarios, climatic condition scenarios, were selected for evaluation of future conditions, a moderate climate scenario and a hot and dry scenario. The moderate change scenario represents the middle of the road and uses the 50th percentile change factor for both precipitation and temperature from the ensemble of global climate model data. The left graph shows the 50th percentile change factors for precipitation, and the bottom left graph shows the 50th percentile change factors for temperature. As can be seen, there's a greater change projected for temperature over the planning horizon than precipitation. The extreme change scenario that was modeled is the hot and dry scenario, which uses the 5th percentile change factor for precipitation and the 95th percentile change factor for temperature. The top right graph shows the 5th percentile change factors for precipitation, and the bottom right graph shows the 95th percentile change factors for temperature. A scenario with no temperature and precipitation change relative to historical observations was also evaluated. The two temperature and precipitation conditions affect the future raw water supply availability, as shown by the horizontal orange arrow on the slide. The two different population projection estimates affect the future water demands, as shown by the vertical blue arrow on the slide. 4 model scenarios, all with different supply and demand conditions, were developed to reflect potential future conditions, as shown in the graphic above. The intense pressure scenario includes the 5th/95th percentile temperature and precipitation change factors and the expected growth population estimates to inform water demand. The full speed ahead scenario consists of 50th percentile temperature and precipitation change factors and also still the expected growth population estimates and associated water demands. The easy does it scenario consists of the 5th and 95th percentile temperature and precipitation change factors, and the historical growth trend for population estimates and associated water demand. And then lastly, the resource abundance scenario includes the 50th percentile temperature and precipitation change factors, and again the historical growth population estimates that inform water demand. These four scenarios allow for planning of different supply and demand conditions and what they might look like and how those conditions compare to the infrastructure that is needed. As discussed, the different temperature and precipitation scenarios will impact water supply availability. In the model, the surface water supply availability was changed based on the assumed temperature and precipitation change factors. However, groundwater availability values were unchanged based on these change factors. The graph shown here shows total supply availability before any demands for both surface water and groundwater over time are taken out for both of the change scenarios. Generally, the extreme change scenario, hotter and drier, results in less available surface water over time and therefore less available total raw water supply. This bar chart shows the assumed future water demands over time in Ross County broken up by type. As shown previously, current demands are mostly industrial demands. For future demands, industrial demands continue to remain most of the total demand. Agricultural demands also have a notable future increase beginning in 2040. The assumptions for future agricultural demands will be discussed in more detail on the following slide. Ohio State University was consulted about assumed increases in future agricultural irrigation water demands. It's estimated that by 2040, agricultural fields will need at least 5 inches of irrigated water during the critical growing season, which is between July and September. Based on this information, the team reviewed future land use to identify where agricultural fields are expected to be in 2040 and in 2050, and calculated the water demand that would be needed for 5 inches of irrigation across those agricultural areas. These irrigation demands are present for 2040 and 2050 condition and are assumed to use groundwater for their source water. Based on the assumed irrigation needs discussed on the previous slide, the agricultural demands were increased by approximately 20 MGD at the county level for 2050 and 2040, which is shown in the circled dark gray bars. It should be noted that this increase in agricultural irrigation demands is specific to the critical growing period of July through September. With respect to the future conditions surrounding water and wastewater treatment capacity, no future new or increased water or wastewater treatment capacities were assumed for Ross County within the Integrated Water Resources Model. In this section, we will discuss water resource and related infrastructure needs at the county level. This graph shows the combined surface water and groundwater supplies in orange and graphed on the right y-axis, as well as the maximum monthly municipal water demands in the light blue line, and combined water treatment capacity in the dark blue line, both graphed on the left y-axis, over time. Since the demands are less than the water treatment plant capacity and the raw water supplies for all years in the planning period, the treatment capacity and raw water supplies are deemed sufficient to meet municipal demands at the county level. In this graph, the demands represented by the light blue lines now include municipal and private water system demands. The raw water supplies and water treatment capacity are sufficient to meet the municipal and private water system demands over time at the county level. Now the non-municipal demands, except for industrial and agricultural demands, have been included in the solid and dashed light blue lines. The demands shown in the light blue include municipal, private water system, and all non-municipal demands except industrial and agricultural. Raw water supplies and combined water treatment capacity are sufficient to meet these demands at the county level. When assumed industrial demands are added in, as shown in the top graph, the raw water supplies are still sufficient, but the combined water treatment capacity is not sufficient to meet the water demands across all of these types at the county level. The demands surpass the water treatment capacity in the base year at the county level. When the assumed agricultural demands are added in, as shown in the bottom graph, the raw water supplies are still sufficient, but the combined water treatment capacity is not sufficient to meet the water demands across these types at the county level. The demands surpass the water treatment capacity by 2040 at the county level. And it's important to note that these agricultural and industrial demands are often not met with treated water from municipal water treatment plants. But this evaluation of capacity versus demands at the county level can be really important if it's ever considered whether or not these demand types may be brought into the utility service area. When all assumed demands are added together, the raw water supplies are still shown to be sufficient, but the water treatment plant capacity combined at the county level is not sufficient to meet the water demands across all types for the entire county. The demands surpass the water treatment plant capacity in the base year at the county level. And again, it's important to note that industrial and agricultural demands are not expected to be served by municipal water treatment plants, and therefore that water treatment plant capacity is not a limiting factor at the county level. This slide presents similar information but relative to wastewater treatment capacity. On this graph, the annual average municipal wastewater demand for the expected growth trend is shown in light blue, and the wastewater treatment capacity combined at the county level is shown in dark blue. Existing wastewater treatment capacity is sufficient to meet future municipal demands at the county level. The previous section evaluated supply and infrastructure availability relative to demands at the county level. This following section will address resource gaps and abundances when you consider where those supplies, infrastructure, and demands are actually projected to occur within the county relative to each other. The dashboard planning tool that was created as part of this study helps users visualize resource gaps and resource abundances over the planning horizon. The nodes on the map, or the circles on the map, are color-coded by type and are sized based on how large of a gap or how large of an abundance they represent. If a node is filled in red, that indicates that it represents a gap. Gap definitions are as follows. For a surface water node, it's a gap if any shortage is observed throughout the planning horizon. For a reservoir node, it's designated as a gap if its usable storage ever falls below a 20% threshold. For a groundwater node, it's a gap if its remaining groundwater amount on a given day ever reaches zero. For a water treatment plant, it's a node that will look like a gap if its projected maximum month average flow ever exceeds 80% of the permitted capacity over the planning horizon. And then lastly, for a wastewater treatment plant, it will be designated as a gap if its projected maximum annual average flow ever exceeds 100% of its associated permitted capacity. This table summarizes resource gaps within the county for each scenario and model year. There are at most 3 gaps for any given scenario and year for the entire county. 2 identified resource gaps in the county are infrastructure-based, and one of the identified gaps is raw water supply-based. These gaps will be further explored on subsequent slides. Findings in the subsequent slides reflect the one selected scenario shown here, which is the expected growth trend with moderate temperature and precipitation change in 2040, also referred to as the full speed ahead scenario. The 2040 full speed ahead scenario was selected as the target planning scenario to allow stakeholders to assess the current and future project needs without extending too far into the uncertain future, and while also using reasonable temperature and precipitation change factors. The following slides will provide detailed discussion of the potential projects that could fill identified water resource and infrastructure gaps within the county. The next phase in the project focused on identification of opportunities and strategies to fill resource and infrastructure gaps that are available for viewing by way of the dashboard. Gaps can be filled through a variety of ways depending on the type of gap. For example, a supply gap can be filled by constructing a new reservoir or implementing a policy to restrict use during times of low supply availability. Other solutions include expanding treatment capacity and leveraging reuse water. Gaps are often filled with a project or by a set of projects. A gap or a set of gaps can be filled with a variety of ways and can exist across one or multiple model scenarios. A scenario scorecard was developed to assess the favorability of a project used to fill a gap. 5 scorecard criteria were developed to evaluate projects compared to each other as indicated on this slide. Scenario applicability assesses if a project will fill a gap across one or more scenarios. The more scenarios it addresses, the better, because it means the project is relevant across multiple potential future conditions. Similarly, but a little different, within the same scenario, a project that fills more than one gap is considered to be more favorable because it achieves multi-objective optimization. Life cycle costs are another important consideration. The total life cycle costs include construction, operation, maintenance, and other projected costs. The water quality impact criterion considers impacts associated with development as well as changing water and wastewater use. A project that provides higher protections to water quality is considered more favorable. And then finally, a project with a shorter implementation timeline would be considered more favorable because the benefits of that project can be realized sooner. The next few slides provide solution strategies for the 2040 full speed ahead planning scenario. Note that findings on the resource gaps were previously discussed and can be further explored using the dashboard planning tool. The dashboard facilitates exploration of gaps across model scenarios and whether a given project option is relevant across scenarios. Although we're focusing on the 2040 full speed ahead model scenario, project options presented here generally address gaps beyond this one scenario. Pre-planning level projects are provided as examples and possible solutions to fill gaps. Additional efforts are needed to define, plan, and implement a project as outlined in next steps. Further detail on the gaps are provided in tabular format on the next slide. Overall, project options have been categorized by type into one of three categories. The first is a local category. This involves utilities largely using their own assets to fill a gap or an industry providing its own on-site solutions. The second category is a regional project options, where utilities collaborate with other utilities. And the last category is a reuse category, where utilities leverage reuse water to provide non-potable water to industrial users to reduce potable water demands. This table provides detailed information on the projected resource gaps in the 2040 full speed ahead scenario for Ross County. A key finding is that water supply is generally sufficient based on the rated capacity of the existing water treatment plants. The Kingston Village water treatment plant does not supply any industrial demands. It has only one municipal demand. The Kingston Village water treatment plant is supplied with water from groundwater, called the Skippo Creek Scioto River, which provides water to several industrial demands at Pickaway County. The South Salem wastewater treatment plant does not supply any industrial demands. It has only one municipal demand. The South Salem wastewater treatment plant discharges water into the Buckskin Creek. For the Kingston Village water treatment plant, the gap of 1.4 MGD is driven by expected population growth. Kingston Village has an existing regional connection to Ross County utilities to help meet municipal demands. While the connection has not been included in the modeling, sufficient capacity does exist for this connection to be used to meet projected growth in water demand. The South Salem wastewater treatment plant has a relatively small projected gap of 0.01 MGD. The timing and right sizing of an expansion of the wastewater treatment plant should be aligned with the municipality's priorities. Due to the size of the gap, South Salem should monitor growth and consider smaller projects like an equalization tank or inflow and infiltration reduction to employ at a lower cost to address the gap. The Little Creek North Fork Paint Creek Aquifer was projected to be a resource gap by the study's model. The aquifer is the source water for the Frankfort Village water treatment plant, as well as various industrial demands and agricultural demands. With increased population, increased agricultural demands, and ongoing industrial operations, the aquifer is projected to be a gap in 2040. It's recommended to monitor this gap in the future by having ongoing coordination with the agricultural community and those related to industrial growth to see if future irrigation demands are indeed coming to fruition, and also to explore potential future alternative supplies to meet these demands. Aquifer recharge projects may also be up for consideration. This next section will present the evaluation conducted to determine areas of opportunity, which are defined as areas where there is assumed modeled surplus in capacity with respect to either the source water or infrastructure. It should be noted that this section only identifies potential areas of opportunity. Project planning and utilization of surplus capacities will require further evaluation and discussion with local municipalities and stakeholders. First, let's discuss areas of opportunity with respect to raw water supply availability. Raw water supply sources in the county do have opportunity for growth. There is surface water opportunity throughout the center of the county on the Scioto River. However, water quality should be evaluated due to the upstream wastewater discharges. Groundwater is also available along the Scioto River Basin and provides opportunity throughout the county. Next, let's look at areas of opportunity or surplus resource availability with respect to water and wastewater treatment infrastructure. Both Ross County water treatment plants have remaining water treatment plant capacity, though source water for the water treatment plants needs to also be assessed if that remaining capacity is to be fully leveraged. Chillicothe has available wastewater and water treatment plant capacity available for opportunity. An in-depth availability analysis confirmed that there is indeed sufficient source water for the Chillicothe water treatment plant as well. In this next section, we will present the project findings related to projected water quality across the planning horizon. While the Central Ohio Regional Water Study was primarily focused on water supply and infrastructure capacity, the models developed were also used to project potential impacts to water quality that may occur due to changes in population, land use, infrastructure, and climate. The goals for the water quality assessment were to 1. Characterize existing water quality conditions. The study identified watershed with the highest existing water quality. Such pristine watersheds were considered to be the most sensitive to future development. 2. Determine potential impacts. The study developed potential impact factors based on available data and the suite of possible future scenarios, including those evaluated for water supply and treatment. 3. Watersheds were characterized as having higher or lower potential for impacts based on the identified impact factors. The scenarios use a wide range of future conditions, so the intent here is to illustrate where there's more likely water quality impacts given the uncertainty over the exact future conditions that will happen. And then lastly, fourth, provide recommendations and activities that could be completed by local agencies, utilities, and organizations to help offset, mitigate, and protect against water quality degradation. The graphic illustrates the approach to characterizing existing water quality and understanding the potential for future impacts. Those watersheds having both high existing water quality and high potential for future impacts should be considered as the highest priority for action. Watersheds throughout the region were characterized using the following 3 metrics. 1. Quality of aquatic habitat. It's a standardized metric for measuring the quality of aquatic habitat at a specific location within a stream. The average QHEI score in a watershed was calculated to determine the overall aquatic habitat score. 2. Targeted water quality standards. The aquatic life use designation as well as anti-degradation tiers provide a listing of streams that are targeted to remain high quality. These are assigned to stream reach for each HUC 12 watershed. The REACH categorizations for anti-degradation and aquatic use designations were evaluated to determine an overall categorization at the watershed level. And 3. Stream biological health. The Ohio Environmental Protection Agency has performed modeling to estimate the potential biological health of headwater streams based on land use factors and desktop analyses. This modeling generated an estimate for all of the headwater streams in each watershed. A summary categorization of the results was applied to each watershed based on all of the stream reaches within its boundary. Given the above factors, an overall water quality category was applied to each HUC 12 watershed, ranging from poor to excellent. For Ross County, the majority of the watershed scored as good or excellent, with a few small exceptions. 4 factors were used to determine the potential for future impacts to water quality. First, land use. The population and land use projections provided by MORPC were used to estimate the overall change in the percent imperviousness of the watershed as estimated to occur by 2030, 2040, and 2050. Literature data has shown that increased impervious area in a watershed is typically correlated with decreasing water quality. As impervious area increases, the overall stream water quality tends to decrease. Second, hydromodification. When streams see higher flows and/or more frequently occurring storm events, stream banks may experience increased erosion. With these flow changes, streams may become incised or disconnected from floodplains, resulting in a decrease in water quality and increase in suspended solids. Third, increased occurrence of low flows. During dry weather conditions, healthy streams may typically maintain base flows to support aquatic life. If the low flow periods are extended or flows are projected to be lower under future conditions, it could have a negative impact on water quality due to loss of aquatic habitat and could therefore lead to more restrictive permitting requirements. And then lastly, temperature and precipitation. Changes in temperature and precipitation were considered in multiple scenarios. The stream model was again used to evaluate the impact of temperature and precipitation conditions during low flows. In some watersheds, the impact of temperature and precipitation on stream flows was found to be more significant due to lower flows during dry conditions that were not able to be offset through either wastewater treatment plant effluent or increased runoff. The potential land use impacts on water quality were evaluated based on projected changes to both population and land cover. The population and land use projections were provided by MORPSI. The data were used to estimate the overall change in percent imperviousness within each watershed. The colors shown here reflect the absolute percent increase in impervious area. Thus, a 5% increase in impervious area would indicate that the total percent imperviousness in the watershed would increase from 10 to 15%, for example. Literature shows a strong correlation between stream conditions and the percent imperviousness for a watershed. As the percent impervious increases, water quality tends to decrease, particularly in areas without appropriate setbacks, mitigation, or stormwater controls. The second factor previously mentioned is hydromodification impacts. When streams see higher flows and/or more frequently occurring storm events, stream banks may experience increased erosion. With these flow changes, streams may become incised or disconnected from floodplains, resulting in a decrease in water quality and increase in suspended solids. A stream model was developed for the entire 15-county study area to simulate stream flow from runoff as well as from wastewater treatment plant infrastructure. Future scenarios were developed that examine the impact of changes in population, land use, and temperature and precipitation on projected flows. 40 years of simulated stream flow were analyzed to determine the impact of different future scenarios on projected flows. Flows from the model were used to determine which watersheds may have a higher potential for channel modification due to changes in flows. Watersheds shown here in dark blue have a higher potential for future hydromodification impacts based on the regional watershed model. For watersheds with a downstream modeled link, any of the watersheds that saw a 10% or higher increase in projected flows during frequently occurring storm events were designated as having a higher potential for hydromodification. The watersheds with the lower potential may still experience hydromodification in isolated instances, but changes are not projected to be as significant given the range of forecasted scenarios. The third factor is increased occurrence of low flows. During dry weather conditions, healthy streams may typically maintain base flows to support aquatic life. If those low flow periods are extended or flows are projected to be even lower, it may have a negative impact on water quality and lead to more restrictive permitting requirements. The stream model was used to simulate stream flow from runoff as well as from wastewater treatment plant infrastructure. Future scenarios were developed that examine the impact of changes in population, land use, and temperature and precipitation on projected flows. 40 years of simulated stream flow were analyzed to determine the impact of these different scenarios on projected flows. Flows from the model were examined, and evaluation of flows during the driest period was conducted to determine which watersheds may have a higher potential for water quality impacts due to decreased base flows during drier periods. Watersheds in the dark purple color have higher potential for future water quality impacts and more restrictive permitting requirements related to increased occurrence of low flows. For watersheds with a downstream modeled link, any of the watersheds that saw a 10% or greater decrease in projected flows during low flows were designated as having a higher potential for water quality impacts. The watersheds with a lower potential for low flow impacts may still experience impacts due to drier conditions in isolated instances, but changes are not projected to be as significant or as widespread given the modeled results and the range of forecasted scenarios. As noted, these areas are not indicative of any potential water supply or availability concern, but instead indicate areas where low flows could impact habitat and permitting requirements. The fourth factor is temperature and precipitation. Changes in temperature and precipitation were considered in multiple scenarios. The stream model was again used to evaluate the impact of temperature and precipitation conditions during low flows. In some watersheds, the impact of the changing temperature and precipitation on stream flows was found to be more significant due to lower flows during dry conditions, especially areas that were not able to offset low flow through either wastewater treatment plant effluent or increased runoff. The model was used with 40 years of simulated stream flow to determine the impact of the different scenario conditions on projected flows during drier periods. In some watersheds, the impact of temperature and precipitation on stream flows was found to be more significant due to lower flows during dry conditions that were not able to be offset through wastewater treatment plant effluent or increased runoff. The watersheds shown here in the darker blue have a higher potential for future low flow impacts due to temperature and precipitation change. A high impact, i.e. hot and dry temperature, and precipitation scenario was compared against a medium impact temperature and precipitation scenario. For the high impact scenario, if the base flows were lower than those in the medium impact scenario, then the watershed was flagged as having higher potential for water quality impacts due to temperature and precipitation conditions. In some cases, high temperature and precipitation impacts were found to be slightly offset through increased wastewater treatment plant effluent discharge or additional runoff from impervious areas. Overall, these areas flagged as high potential for temperature and precipitation impacts are those areas that may be slightly more vulnerable to temperature and precipitation changes. All of the watersheds experienced some impact in flows due to the changes in temperature and precipitation. The Central Ohio Regional Water Study Dashboard can be used to examine individual watershed characteristics and to identify watersheds with excellent water quality and/or high potential for future impacts. Those watersheds can be considered and prioritized for protection, conservation, restoration, and other activities. Some potential mechanisms are available for water quality protection. With potential water quality impacts identified, considering water quality protection is the next step. Water quality protection is a critical part of any water resource plan. It's important to understand that stream systems are constantly changing due to a number of factors, including vegetative communities, adjacent land uses, and changing temperature and precipitation. The magnitude of change over the next few decades will vary across the region and is subject to several variables. Current development plans indicate that development pressure is being increased in areas that are rapidly developed. Proper protections should be in place prior to development and significant land use changes in order to protect local water quality while supporting economic development. Proactive watershed engagement may reduce or eliminate negative impacts of development on water quality. 4 categories of solutions should be considered, including policy, partnerships, data, and funding that could be used to help offset or mitigate any potential future water quality impacts. Based on the findings of this study, there are some key locations that would benefit from prioritized protections. While all protective measures should be initiated across the region, immediate focus should be directed to protecting the high water quality watersheds with a high potential for future impacts. With respect to water quality protection mechanisms, there should be routine review of local ordinances. Local ordinances should be revisited on a routine basis to ensure they adequately address the changes the region is facing. In general, policies should be revisited on a routine basis to ensure that they align with one another, are well supported with responsibilities delegated appropriately, and adequately protect natural resources. Riparian setbacks protect riparian buffers that reduce runoff and pollutants. Floodplain requirements ensure adequate space is available during storm events for systems to overflow their banks without flooding infrastructure. Stormwater management plans lay out best management practices for reducing stormwater runoff. Zoning and planning codes restrict development to certain areas, and in doing so can be used to protect valuable resources. Tree codes can encourage strategic planting of native and temperature and precipitation resilient trees, which compose riparian buffers and promote stormwater infiltration rather than runoff. Fee rates established for the Planning Commission and the SWCD should be reviewed to ensure that they adequately support proper review. These ordinances may be implemented at various levels in which case a designated authority should be tasked with inventorying where the policies are and are not in effect, and to encourage collaborative efforts. The county should push to have 9-element non-point source implementation strategies, or NPSIS plans, in place as early as possible. NPSIS plans are defined at the HUC 12 watershed level. There are 43 HUC 12 watersheds completely or partially located in Ross County, none of which have an Ohio EPA approved NPSIS plan in place. NPSIS plans need to be approved in order to be eligible for 319 funding and to help define and prioritize projects. The NPSIS is a living strategic planning document that summarizes causes and sources of impairment, establishes critical areas, identifies quantifiable objectives to address causes and sources of impairment, and describes projects designed to meet those objectives. The NPSIS is designed to evolve as projects come and go and will need to be reevaluated periodically, similar to the regulations mentioned above. And then lastly, MS4 compliance. NPDES permits are routinely updated. Every 10 years, urban areas, or UAs, are redefined by the Ohio EPA based on census data. The next census will be in 2030. Communities need to be prepared if they are close to reaching that threshold. Communities can consider the eventual need for separating permit administrative duties as communities approach UA definition. Communities can consider adopting additional regulations for areas experiencing rapid development that are not within a defined UA. Communities can ensure that plans and resources are in place to support adequate preparation and review of an increased number of PTI and NOI applications. Communities can ensure resources are in place to support increased number of SWPPP reviews and construction site inspection. And then lastly, communities can also educate themselves and associated stakeholders on grant funding and other mechanisms available to support compliance with local water quality initiatives. MS4 communities can leverage a NPSIS plan to meet permit requirements by identifying watershed-specific strategies and projects that improve water quality. By integrating data collection efforts from NPSIS plans into MS4 compliance activities, municipalities can improve regulatory efficiency, strengthen funding opportunities, and enhance water quality improvements. With respect to water quality protection mechanisms, strengthening partnerships between municipalities, watershed organizations, and other local governmental agencies is important. Communities don't need to work alone. Planning efforts are typically developed with input from state and local agencies, watershed groups and nonprofits, soil and water conservation districts, and universities and research institutions. By coordinating efforts with these stakeholders, communities can collaborate to get together and coordinate current issues and upcoming plans. Collaboration may include meeting regularly to discuss trends, projects, and upcoming plans. This can be outlined in stormwater master plans and can be expanded upon to involve additional stakeholders to discuss overall watershed action items. One can invite guest speakers to learn about new opportunities. Representatives from existing partnerships or outside agencies can share success stories, lessons learned, and upcoming opportunities for projects and funding. Collaborating data collection and permit review responsibilities to ensure responsibilities are delegated appropriately and that all partners have the resources they need to carry out said responsibilities can also come from this stakeholder engagement. Data can be shared and linked through GIS to improve accessibility, efficiency, and data gap identification. Communities can also increase community engagement and participation with existing watershed partners to create a network of support for managing water quality challenges. For example, support programs that provide training on data collection for monitoring water quality indicators. Citizen scientists can help collect valuable data and observations. This helps engage and inform the community. Communities can facilitate educational opportunities with the public through outreach and trainings, utilize NPSIS plans to identify partners and outreach resources. Communities can host a platform to collect public observations and concerns. This is useful for monitoring spatial changes over time, as well as for identifying key areas of concern for community members. Still within the vein of water quality protection mechanisms, it's of course important to monitor water quality. Local data collection efforts can be bolstered through training and certification programs. More specifically, monitor developmental impacts, implement long-term monitoring programs to assess the cumulative impacts of population growth and development on water resources, educating communities about the importance of water conservation and pollution prevention can encourage responsible behavior and involve communities in data collection in a great way to encourage grassroots efforts to be taken hold. Use these monitoring data to inform revisions to watershed management plans and policies, ensuring that they reflect current and future challenges posed by the population and growth. Also, digitize records. Encourage the use of GIS viewers to store available data collected by various governmental and public entities. Digitize existing record drawings and georeference new development records as they are constructed. Ensure data are collected equitably across the county, focusing on watersheds with high-quality features and those experiencing ongoing issues or areas adjacent to or downstream of new development. And lastly, a few comments on public reporting. Collect observations of flooding, erosion, and general water quality, and store records digitally for analysis and reference. This will help identify areas of concerns that are being felt by the community. Share monitoring results with the public and stakeholders to increase transparency and accountability. The figure shown is a screenshot of some of the layers of the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District that they make available to the public on their GIS viewer. Red dots show public reporting of flooding. Storm sewers are depicted and attributes from records and inspections are stored. Attributes including pipe size, material, depth, and age are readily available and spatially referenced. Inspection data can be tagged for assets for tracking purposes. Department of Health IDDE sampling locations and results are also available. U.S. stream gauges are linked, as well as ODOT bridge inspection data. Planning studies are identified that include reports and recommendations for the problem areas where available. Prioritize infrastructure upgrades. Secure funding for critical infrastructure such as stormwater management systems, wastewater treatment plant upgrades, and failing septic system replacements to support growing populations. Focus on areas identified as current or near-term gaps. Consider future scenarios to inform planning decisions, and assess regional optimization of services as early as possible. Incentivize sustainable practices. Establish funding programs to encourage developers to adopt green infrastructure or other low-impact development techniques that minimize the environmental impact of new construction. Stormwater best management practices, including bioretention, pervious pavement, and extended detention, can also help improve water quality challenges. Encourage redevelopment over new development where possible. Proactively identify areas that are suitable for redevelopment. Leverage grant programs. Clean Ohio Green Space funding is available for preserving green space and riparian areas through Clean Ohio, which is part of the Ohio Department of Public Works. This funding can also be used for property acquisition. The Ohio EPA Water Resource Restoration Sponsor Program allows for nonprofit organizations, parks, and municipalities to apply for funding to protect or restore high-quality water resources, such as Category 3 wetlands, or at least warm water habitat life use designation water supplies. It's a competitive annual process that connects recipients with a sponsor. A sponsor is a recipient of a WPCLF loan. Interest from the sponsor's loan ideally pays for the implementer's projects. Additionally, there's Section 319 grant funding for HUC 12s with existing NIPSEs. And then also there's H2O Ohio, which is described on the next slide. H2 Ohio provides funding through H2 Ohio Rivers and H2 Ohio Wetlands. The Rivers program has several grant funding opportunities. Those that are applicable are listed, as well as the coordinating state agency. First, there's the Agricultural Incentive Program. In 2024, Governor DeWine announced a statewide expansion of H2 Ohio producer incentives, making the initiative available for the first time to producers who farm outside of the Western Lake Erie Basin. For the first round of statewide enrollment, ODA offered enough funding and resources to enroll a new 500,000 acres outside of the Western Lake Erie Basin. More than 525 producers in 51 additional counties enrolled in 2024. The program incentivizes farmers to implement science-based, proven best management practices to prevent nutrient runoff and improve water quality. ODA works closely with the county SWCDs to administer participant contracts, provide technical assistance, and support producers. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, and the state of Ohio are partners in implementing a voluntary Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, the CREP, to enroll up to 67,000 acres of agricultural land in the Lake Erie watershed and to enroll up to 70,000 acres of agricultural land in the Scioto River watersheds within the state of Ohio. Participants receive financial incentives from the USDA to voluntarily enroll environmentally sensitive cropland or pasture land in contracts for a period of 15 years. In return for annual rental payments that average approximately $154 per acre, participants may convert the land to native grasses, trees, and other conservation vegetation. There's the Chloride Reduction Grant Program, which is a new partnership between the Ohio EPA and the Ohio Department of Transportation, or ODOT, focused on reducing salt pollution in Ohio's waterways. The H2 Ohio Chloride Reduction Grant Program now offers grants to communities to help them improve road salt storage and handling to reduce salt runoff into Ohio streams, rivers, lakes, and groundwater. Litter cleanup assistance programs are also offered through ODNR. There are equipment grants available. Ohio EPA awarded more than 250 communities across the state a total of $1 million in grants for equipment needed to maintain their public drinking water infrastructure. The grants cover distribution system equipment such as mobile leak detectors, line locators, valve exercisers, flow meters, hydrant condition assessors, pressure monitors, and training to use this equipment. In 2024, a second round of grants were awarded to over 250 communities for a total of $2.2 million. Equipment obtained under the grant must be used to exercise distribution system valves, perform leak detection in the distribution system, for meter accuracy testing. There's also the Healthy Rivers Livery Grant Program through ODNR. The program will support livery owners in removing trash from rivers and addressing long-standing cleanup needs. The grant will support up to $10,000 in costs to clean up Ohio's rivers and streams. Dam removals are also supported by ODNR and Ohio EPA. The H2 Ohio Rivers program is focused on removing low-head dams across the state that have outlived their intended use and are harming water quality through oxygen depletion, trapped sediment, and interrupted fish migration. There's also water infrastructure funding. Ohio EPA, through H2 Ohio funding, has awarded grants for a variety of water infrastructure improvements, including HSTS replacement, collection and conveyance system improvements, and treatment works upgrades. The H2 Ohio Statewide Wetland Grant Program is a reimbursement grant program that provides up to 100% project funding for high-quality natural infrastructure projects focused on nutrient reduction and water quality improvement across the state of Ohio. Applicants for grant funding for projects outside of the WLEB are open annually. July 2025 starts. Types of eligible H2 Ohio wetland or natural infrastructure projects include wetland creation, hydrologic restoration of wetlands on hydric soils, hydrologic enhancement of existing wetlands, floodplains, and riparian corridors, stream conservation channel design and floodplain restoration, restoration of forested riparian barriers, acid mine drainage abatement projects, dam removal and associated restoration, property acquisition if associated with water quality restoration projects, and stormwater retention and green infrastructure projects. In summary, the Central Ohio Regional Water Study included an evaluation of projected residential and industrial growth, the associated increased water demand, available water resources and water-related infrastructure, including water and wastewater treatment plants. The study evaluated the adequacy of existing resources and infrastructure to meet projected increases in demand over a 25-year planning horizon, extending through 2050. The findings for Ross County can be summarized as follows. Ross County is projected to experience growth in its agricultural irrigation water use. This growth has the potential to put stress on available water resource supplies. Water resource and infrastructure capacity were compared to projected water and wastewater demands. Future projects were identified to alleviate or offset projected gaps. Projects identified as part of this project have been designated as either local, regional, or reuse focused to give a range of potential future investments. In addition, areas of opportunity have been identified, which can lead to regional partnerships and a sharing of resources. As growth occurs throughout the county, plans and pathways for protecting local streams and encouraging sustainable development practices can be leveraged. If you have any comments or questions regarding this presentation or the Central Ohio Regional Water Study Planning Dashboard, please refer to the project website for additional resources as well as for contact information. Thank you very much for your time and interest in the Central Ohio Regional Water Study.